Yeah, it goes late nights on the road. Yeah, that's just how it goes. Yeah, that's just how it goes these days. I'ma try my best to make this flight, but if I don't wake up tomorrow, then the sun will still be. Yeah, it goes late nights on the road. Yeah, that's just how it goes. Yeah, that's just how it goes these days.
Welcome back to another episode of the One Step at a Time podcast with your host, the Ocean Flight 111, heading straight to full potential with Sarah DeLays. And guys, I'm very grateful to have a guest today. My guest today is an artist and person who personifies integrity and consistency with his honesty. He's performed all around the world, from teen discos to performing in front of 70,000 people in Mexico. His music has been streamed over 200 million times across streaming platforms, and he continues to produce and create the finest dance music out of his studio in County Carlow. He's one of the most influential DJs and producers from Ireland in the last 20 years, and has inspired countless DJs across the country to chase their dreams in the world of dance music. I've had the honour of meeting him a handful of times over the years, and every time we meet, I always leave with a smile. Guys, I'd like to welcome John Gibbons to the podcast. What's the crack? How are you?
I'm great. All the better for being here. How are you?
I'm good, man. Yeah. Before we get into everything, I want to bring you back, John. I want to bring you back to the early days. You're a kid. You're in the back seat listening to Fleetwood Mac. You're out in the garden pretending to be a DJ. I've heard you speak about like music has been like a present thing, like since you were young. When you were in the back garden pretending to be on the radio or whatnot, what's them memories like?
Oh man, I remember them so well because obviously little did I know at the time, but that would become my path. So obviously the imprint is quite strong. I really felt something strongly back then for music. Probably in a way that maybe a lot of my friends as I grew up didn't, hence it became my career. But yeah, you mentioned Fleetwood Mac. I listened to so much older stuff, like what my parents were listening to. I was the oldest child, and what my parents were listening to is what I was listening to primarily when I was very, very young. There was always music in the house. So Fleetwood Mac, Dire Straits, Elton John, Queen, who are still my favourite band to this day. All that kind of stuff was my early exposure to music, So I was listening to pop music alongside nursery rhymes all the time. And the radio would be on in the car and stuff. And I was just fascinated by these people who came on in between the songs. And I remember very early being annoyed by them and thinking, I just want another song like that. Like, this is really, really, really young. Like, I don't know, I was like 4, 5. And then my mom said to me, well, listen to what they're saying. They're telling us about the songs. Then I realized, suddenly I listened to this guy, the DJ. I now know the name of that song, and I know the name of this song, and suddenly it opened up a whole world to me. I was always big into reading, information gathering from very, very young. I was into collecting things, so I started to collect the names of songs. And in my head, now looking back, it was the formative years of music collection, if that makes sense. So I decided, right, that's the coolest thing ever. Is that someone's job? Yeah, and that's somebody's job. Oh, sure, I can do that too, age 6. And I started pretending to be a radio DJ. Literally, as you say, in the garden, in the car, in bed at night, just practicing imitating what they were saying on the radio. And then again, I must have broken so many of my parents' tape recorders at the time and record players and stuff. Again, putting on songs, presenting the songs, and not knowing how to use the equipment. So as early as I can remember, I was just trying to imitate playing music, presenting music, being around music all the time. So I guess they were the really, really formative years. But I can trace it right back to that. And it was...
I love that you can trace it.
If not an obsession, it was certainly a fascination, and it just never left me.
John, if you were to go back now, if there was a time machine and you were able to go back and have a conversation, let's say with the 6, 7, 8-year-old you, what do you think is a question that they might ask you or you might ask them?
I might ask them, do you think you're wise going into this as a career path?
Have a second thought.
For the roller coaster that lies ahead. That's probably what I would ask them. What they might ask me is, I suppose, if they had an older head back then, they might ask me, well, how rewarding is it to follow your dreams as opposed to the path that people might expect of you, or the potentially most financially rewarding path? And I know what the answer would be to both. It's just a bit of a no-brainer. For me, it's follow what's in the heart as opposed to the head. You can use your head while you're following your heart, because any path that you follow, there are always little diversions you can take. There are always obstacles you'll have to overcome and change that path slightly. So, that's where the head comes in, to navigate an alternate route to get to where you want to go. But I would say I've just been someone who does follow, for better or worse. It's about the journey, and I've just never been one for that linear, straight path that's most trodden, that you can, avoid every obstacle. Like I'll often take a back road rather than the motorway, just for variation.
Hey, you get to see all the fields, don't you? You get to see all the landscape.
And sometimes there's something interesting maybe in the field. There certainly isn't on the motorway. So that would be the answer. And regarding then, are you ready for the ups and downs well, look, that's just part of the territory. It's just what comes, and it makes things interesting. It can be difficult, but it can be very, very rewarding at the same time. And I think, sometimes if you're going through a bad time, I might disagree with myself here, but I think by and large, I would rather have the ups and downs, the peaks and the troughs, and actually be able to experience and to feel life, as opposed to just drifting. To me, drifting is, it's the worst thing. It's why I struggled with school, not academically, but in the later years of school, kind of from, fourth year on in particular, because I was growing as a person, developing into, the person I suppose that I am now, and started to find my feet, and I just couldn't deal
Identity.
with the mundanity of it. Yeah, just the same thing over and over and over again. And some people are built that way, and they thrive in that kind of an environment. I don't. For me, it's let's take the hard times with the good times and see what happens along the way. It's a journey.
Love it. John, one of the things that always stands out about you is the freshness. It always feels like you're doing things for the first time. There's always a sense of not naivety, but a sense of joy, a sense of happiness, a sense of excitement. Are you someone? Now, there are usually words that you could maybe associate with childhood, because everything's the first time, is excited, everything that's happening. Are you someone that delves into your childhood often, or are you someone that kind of separates it and you're on your path? Because you speak about the rainbow, having that like rainbow. You spoke about it in a previous podcast. And again, when we're children, we have that sense of rainbow, the sense of like anything's possible. You seem to have kept that no matter what, even through your ups and downs. Is that hard to keep?
Yeah, I've had to work really hard to keep that, to be honest. And there have been times where, like that rainbow, as I call it, the bright spark after the rain, there have been times where that dims considerably, as it does for everybody. It's life, stuff goes on in our lives that drag us down, and dark clouds come in and it starts to rain again. But I have discovered, as time has gone on, if I'm willing to work on myself, if I'm willing to take the hard decisions sometimes, no matter how much I mightn't want to, I'm just drawn towards trying to do the right thing for me. Well, then that rainbow will come out again and the sun comes out, So, no, it's not easy always, and it's something you have to work really hard on. But I think just as people, as humans, those of us that work most on ourselves will reap the benefits. Some of us have to work harder than others. Each person's on their own journey. And while on the outside looking in, social media age and all that, everything looks like rainbows and sparkles. Everything looks amazing on the outside looking in. There's nobody has that life. Absolutely nobody. And quite often it's the people where it looks most amazing who have the biggest dips, because the peaks can be so high, And I can even like to take a microcosmic approach to that, or a view of it. Even a gig, I can get a high when I'm on stage, and it's just a natural high. I've never been into drugs, not much of a drinker at all. It's just the music does it for me, and I get that natural high. And I discovered quite early on, particularly when I got to a stage where I was playing the music I really, really felt, the music I was making myself, all that kind of stuff. I started to get a dip the next day, and it was almost like a gig hangover, and it was nothing to do with tiredness or anything like that. It was just this you know, you're flooded with adrenaline and dopamine and all this other stuff, and all of it, like, it has to go somewhere. It flows out of you, and suddenly you're left in this trough. And that's something I had to learn to manage as well. Had to learn to manage those dips, those natural dips. They're just part of it. Without the dips, you don't get the highs, you know. So then to look at the macro of that extends right throughout life. You know, it's not just to do with a gig. It's not just to do with work, although it can be. You know, I'll see those long-term peaks and troughs. And, you know, sometimes it's nice to have the waves just moving slowly, and it's not always a storm, you know, but it can be. And I just think of those early gigs where I was wondering, why the hell am I so depressed after an amazing
Almost doesn't make sense, yeah.
Yeah, it makes no sense. But once you start to understand it, and you start to understand yourself, you know why it's happening, and then you're able to deal with it much, much better.
Yeah, you spoke about there, I want to point out something, John. You spoke about drink and drugs and how that's never been for you. When you did your first gig, when you did the first teenage gig and just kind of fell into DJing almost, you made a pledge, because for those of you who don't know, it's a big thing in Catholic schools. I don't know if they still do it. We did it when we were in school too, about you make a pledge or whatever that you won't drink till you're 18. No one ever follows it. It's the most useless thing ever. Like, now, there was one person that did follow it, and it was you. So you pledged to 16 that because you felt like, oh, I might drink then? What was that like? You're starting out DJing, something that is synonymous with that world is drinking drugs, but you kind of made an early decision, maybe I don't want to drink.
Yeah, the pledge was a funny one, because I don't know if people still do it, but I think they do. When you make the confirmation, you make a pledge not to drink, and it's just the done thing, and it's normally to 18. But I've kind of always been somebody who, like, what's the point agreeing to do something if you know you're not going to do it? And everybody in Ireland, they drink before they're 18. It's just that rite of passage. I thought, right, well, I'm going to pick a more realistic age. And probably a multifaceted thing in that, like, part of it would have been me rebelling against the norm, which is something I did a lot of in school. You know, wanting to just be that little bit different. I'm not going to do what I'm told. I'm going to do it my way. There would have been an element of that, but primarily it was just to do with the fact that what's the point? I don't want to do something that's pointless. I don't want to agree to something that I know I'm going to break. It was brought up to, you know, that if you make a promise, keep it. And this was a promise or a pledge. So I thought, right, 16, that's more realistic. And because I made it, I just thought, right, I'll stick to that, and never thought about it again. And then when I did reach 16, as you said earlier, like, I was already DJing then at that age, and the music had just completely taken over. While my friends were going out kind of drinking or trying to get into bars and stuff like that, I was already in those bars DJing. I was already in nightclubs at that age DJing. And I was just never attracted to the drink. I got my buzz from music. My friends would be in there buzzing off me in their way, doing whatever they're doing. And that was just always enough for me. So it's not that I never drink, like, I'm not teetotal. But the whole kind of stage of going out, rebelling through drink, passed me completely by. And while music wasn't rebellion for me, it just ticked that box, you know, it ticked that getting out there among people, the social element. I was in the same places as my friends. You know, probably a more comfortable environment. Some of them would be out in fields, you know, as you do. I just never did that, because the minute I started DJing, it's just what I wanted to do, and I was doing it all the time. So I didn't need it. And the drugs thing, completely and utterly, despite being surrounded by it all the time, it just completely passed me by. I don't know if this was a reason for it, but I remember sneaking onto a bus when I was way too young to go and see the Prodigy in what is now the 3 Arena. It was the Point Depot at the time in Dublin. And there was a music shop in Carlow that I worked in during school holidays, and they organised buses for the region to go to concerts. And anyway, I stuck my name down on the book for this bus and went with a friend of mine, and obviously pretended we were staying in each other's houses or whatever, but went to the Prodigy, and it was all much, much older guys and girls on the bus. I was sitting there shiting myself Like I said, they just don't talk to me. You know, I was terrified by what was going on because they were all drinking, they were all doing drugs. And anyway, there was one guy on the way home was having a really bad trip, whatever he was doing. He was like in bits all over the place. There was an ambulance met him when the bus got back to Carlo and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if that scared me. I was scared by it at the time. I don't necessarily think that's what put me off drugs, but it must have had some sort of an impact. But a little bit like drinking, the hangover, the thought of the hangover would have been many, many nights, even on a night out, enough to put me off drinking to excess. I just don't want that. I don't want to feel bad when it's self-inflicted in that way. You know, we can feel bad, and if we embrace it, we can grow from it and learn from it. But a hangover was never that for me. Like the first time I ever had one, I thought, this is not something I want again. So, you know, there's a certain degree of watching what's going on, deciding what I want and what I don't want, and just I can stick to a decision. It's just one of those things I could do. Peer pressure was never really a factor for me. I don't care, and never did, what others were doing. I can be around them, but I don't necessarily have to engage in everything they're doing to fit in. And that's what the whole drinking drugs thing was for me. I've never done a drug in my life. I have engaged in some practices that some people might consider drugs, i.e. plant medicine, which is a totally different thing, whatever people's opinion and views and perspective on them are. But I've never done recreational drugs.
Indulge in other stuff. John, I think you spoke about there being able to stand on a decision. Do you think you just often, like when I was growing up, if I started drinking too much, if I started smoking weed too much or whatnot, music would always like, I can't explain it any other way, but like just like a little magnetic force that would always just pull me back in and pull me right back to the path I knew I was supposed to be going on. Do you think music had that effect on you? Because once you started DJing, you're DJing 6-7 days a week. You're working so hard that it just gave it, I'm not going to say like it guarded you, but it just had this force that was like, this is what I need to do and this is the path I'm on, and anything else is almost like a distraction from this purity that's in my heart.
I think so, yeah. I think that's part of it. There's just that, it's just in you, you know, and everybody has that thing that's in them, that thing that they're most passionate about. Some people mightn't have found it yet, but it is in there, whatever it is. I was lucky enough to find that for myself. So it was an expression of creativity. And I had different stages to my career, some more creative than others, but I always found the creative spark. Even in the early days, if I was doing a wedding and you knew what music you had to go in and play, and you're playing ABBA and you're doing all this stuff, and like you're playing a lot of music you mightn't necessarily like, but I still enjoyed it because I was able to find the creative spark in that.
And you're in the right realm too. You were doing what you loved. That's
it, do what you love. And there's always a way. It's not like DJing isn't just about going in and playing particular songs. It's the way that you play them. It's when you play them. It's, you know, it's the interaction with the crowd. So I was always attracted to just obviously the creative spark and what, as you say, was deep inside me that you would come back to. But I also liked the fact that it wasn't it was one of the paths less trodden. There was an element of rebellion insofar as, well, if I can make money for this, I don't have to get a job. I don't have to follow the path that people would have expected of me, you know. Because despite some of the rebelliousness in school, I was pretty good academically, and you know, the usual career paths people expect you to go into. You're going to be this, you're going to be that, you're going to be the other. And the fact that I didn't have to do that and I was able to just pick something completely outside the box, that was gratifying when I look back now. I probably wasn't consciously aware of it at the time, but that was definitely a subconscious driving factor for me. And look, whether we agree with it or whether we accept it or not, we are driven by the subconscious, not the conscious. So
this is true.
There's a lot of that in there for me.
This is true. John, when you were doing them 21st, them weddings, again, you're in the realm. I speak about when it comes to your dreams, sometimes you're not always going to be in the exact center of what you want to be doing. But if you're in the realm, if there was a Venn diagram and you're not in the middle, if you're just in the left or right circle, you're in the realm, you're in the world of it. And if you're in the world of it, then it's only a matter of time before you can move right into the middle of the Venn diagram. When you were going through college and doing maybe weddings or 21st, when was the maybe spark of the step to like make this a full-fledged career and like bring everything to like a new level maybe?
That's a good question, because it was evolution rather than revolution for me, and there were probably 3 stages to getting to where I am now. Three careers, if you like. The first one, which was the formative stuff, was starting to DJ, starting to get gigs for myself, buying equipment so I could be out on the road once I was old enough to drive. And my poor dad had to drive me everywhere in the early days.
Shout out the Pops, man. Shout out the Pops.
Yeah. Then, you know, bars, nightclubs, playing commercial music, pop music, chart, all that kind of stuff. Like, dance music was in there in me all the time. I remember being so envious of seeing DJs who only played dance music and thinking, oh my God, what a dream. But I knew I could get there. As you say, if I was in there somewhere on that Venn diagram, that's somewhere I can get to. So during college, DJing, and as you say, I was DJing like 6-7 nights a week. DJing was a way to put myself through college. I started an agency then providing DJs to clubs and bars all over the country. So there was the business side of it as well. I didn't particularly enjoy that, but it was, you know, the money was pretty good, and learned a lot about the business end of it, you know. Learned a lot of hard lessons as well. Learned how to lose money. Learned, you know, when you're self-employed, if you don't chase money, you're not getting paid, etc. So like there were a lot of hard lessons there too. But once college finished, and I did finish college, once I was finished, I said I'd give it 2 years and let's just see what happens. And I never looked back, but there was a next stage. So there was
Just on the 2 years, John, just to interrupt because it's important. Did you really give yourself 2 years? Or was it a thing of, oh, I'll give myself 2 years, but deep down you're like, I think this is it. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, look, you're probably right. I've never actually been presented with that harsh reality, you know, because I do remember saying I'll give myself 2 years, but I think you're right. I think deep down I knew that was it for me. Like, I didn't even go to my college graduation. Like, that's how invested I was in college because I had a gig versus DJing. So this was just a part of me. Even my social life in college revolved around not college friends, but my friends from, you know, the DJ community and DJing and being in bars and clubs and pubs and all that side of things. So it was a very different college existed. It wasn't really, I didn't experience college life per se. I did enough to get by. Like I remember picking particular courses based on the hours and based on the time that lectures started, as opposed
That's
to...
one way to pick it. That's one way to pick them.
And that is what I did. Like, remember in second year in college, I had 7 hours of lectures a week because that was what I could shave it down to, you know, and didn't go to tutorials unless they were mandatory, and just were ridiculously crammed for exams, and may or may not have cheated in the odd exam as well, you know, just whatever it took to get through college, because I was determined not to quit. And I never really considered that. I tend not to quit. And I'm glad I did it, even though I've done nothing, obviously, with the degree since.
What was the degree?
The degree is history and politics. Yeah, and the plan was then to, well, I say the plan, was it really ever the plan? Was then to do the bar exam and become a barrister.
Okay.
Yeah,
what?
Yeah, so, look, there's another... there's a life path there. There's, you know, a parallel life, which is legal practice, which I have actually practiced law for years, albeit not at a professional level as a lay litigant. Again, it's that argumentative streak, it's that rebellious streak, and it started with fighting like things like parking fines and stuff, and it extended to mortgage. I mean, we can go down that path.
Yeah, we'll get into the parking. I want to bring up the parking one a little bit.
But yeah, that's what I was going to do. Like, there was a lot of in the family, the legal profession was kind of ingrained in one half of the family, and would have had a lot of connections there. And it would have been not an easy path, obviously, but a path that I would have had a lot of contacts in, and it made sense. And I was just attracted to debate and argument all the time, still am. So that's kind of what I thought I would do professionally-ish. But it's not what I did in the end.
Wow, I didn't know that part now. I didn't know that that's the maybe another world and another alternative universe. John, before I interrupt you there, just because I got excited, I want to point something out. You're on about the 3 stages of your career. So you're leaving college. I know is it Tony David is a big influence, is one of your biggest influences. So who were what other influences were there at the moment and at that period leaving college? And then what were your steps then in that first part of the first chapter you were speaking about in your career?
There are a couple of things that stand out and a couple of people that stand out. Like Tony DeVitt was a big one just because, like talk about somebody who died way, way too soon. He was playing a style of music. It was kind of known as New Energy at the time. It was like early hard house. It was so different. It was so energetic. It was just something that attracted me really, really in a way that a lot of other DJs didn't. There was one particular mix album that I remember hearing for the first time. A friend of mine brought it into, I remember the dress rehearsal for a school play that we had parts in. And it was Carl Cox's Fact, which is one of the seminal dance music albums. That blew the head clean off me. I would have been in probably fourth year in school. I just started to DJ, or maybe hadn't, but I was on the cusp of it at that stage. And it just absolutely, because like I knew commercial dance music and I knew the likes of, say, Rhythm is a Dancer, Culture Beat, acts like that. But when I heard this CD, I just, what the hell is it? And it still kind of defies genre or labeling, as Carl Cox's sets would still do. People call him a techno DJ, but it's not always techno, you know. And I was always attracted to that, getting in and out, finding those gaps between genres, not always being pigeonholed into one thing. So I was never a trance DJ, I was never a techno DJ, I was never a commercial DJ. It was just whatever felt right. And yeah, just a music lover, exactly. And sometimes in DJing, not so much now, but when I was starting to make the transition from commercial gigs to dance music gigs, and they would have been, the lineups I was on would have been primarily the kind of trance-leaning lineups, trance, tech, trance, that side of things. Like you get a certain amount of, well, you get plenty of abuse in this job, but you get a certain amount of pushback from people who would say, oh, he's not a purist because he did an edit of Cutting Crew Died in Your Arms, for example. I always was looking to blend stuff, and now it's commonplace. The barriers are just gone cross genre, you know. But at the time they weren't, and again, it was just I used to nearly feed off that abuse. It was like, yeah, well, fuck you. I'll do what I want to do. I'm watching the way crowds react. You can stand there in 1,000 people, and you know you can do that to me all you like, and you can ruin your own night, while the 999 other people and me will have the best night ever. And I used to kind of feed off that. So Carl Cox Fact 1 was definitely huge for me. There was a DJ, Corvin Dalek. He doesn't really DJ anymore, a Hungarian guy who booked for a night when I started promoting gigs during college in Dublin. And I was really heavily influenced by his style of music for many, many years. His manager ended up becoming my manager for the bones of 7 or 8 years, opened me up to an international audience for the first time ever, and really just moved me from here to here in terms of where I wanted to be, and making that transition and that leap from commercial clubs to proper dance events, you know. So hugely influential there. There are so many. In Mark Kavanagh in Ireland, a huge influence on me. Mark Kavanagh and Mr. Spring, who were SoundCrowd, but Mark in particular, so supportive, not just of me, of so many DJs coming through. Somebody who'd been there, done it all, seen it all, still heavily involved in music, a journalist as well. And he was able to look at things from all kinds of different angles, always there to give support, always trying to push Irish guys with his contacts. He was one of the few in the early days, because it was such a closed kind of world.
Like many genres, man. Like many, so
yeah,
closed.
Absolutely. And a very Dublin-centric world. And not coming from Dublin, I always felt a little bit like the outsider. You know, and it could be trickier to break into that world. Mark Kavanagh was someone who just used to shatter those glass ceilings and kick doors open for you. A kick is probably the wrong word. He gently opened them for you because he's the nicest guy and everybody likes him with good reason. So, you know, Mark could make a phone call or drop a hint or make a suggestion, and suddenly the door that had 25 locks on it, it turns out none of them were locked, and it just gently pushes open, you know. So These are the people and the sounds that were so influential for me. And eventually I just kind of found my own. Like trance was very informative for me, the emotive side of dance music. More so, I would say, than techno and the brute force of techno. Now I love the fact that I can just kind of do both at the same time, you know.
Blending, as you said previously, blending. John, when you started to do them more international gigs, did you have the sense in yourself, okay, I'm leveling up here now, I'm starting to really upgrade? Did it feel what? Because like I guess there's a difference between, even though like it's the same job, there's a difference between maybe doing a gig in a local county or county next door and then getting a flight, having your bags packed, getting booked for something that is outside of the country. That has to be quite the feeling.
Yeah, because it was something that I aspired to for so long, and it's probably something that I thought, oh, well, sure, how can I do that? That's for other people. And just to reference that, just to give a bit of a frame of reference, I remember going to Ibiza for the first time with friends on a holiday. It would have been after leaving cert or first year in college or something. And me going over with my box of records thinking, right, sure, I'm a great DJ. I'll walk into clubs here. And discovering I was really good at blagging into the right areas where the contacts were in the VIP areas and stuff like that, but couldn't get a gig to save my life. So I learned some lessons there, but there was one particular moment in Ibiza. A friend of mine and myself, we were walking along a particular street, and a Mercedes 500 SL, I remember it was a deep kind of maroon colour, convertible, top off, sped past, and I remember seeing in the passenger seat of that Fergie, DJ Fergie. Okay. Now Fergie would have been Tony DeVitt, who we mentioned earlier, as protege. Fergie's from Larne in Northern Ireland, and he was plucked at the age of about 15 or 16. He supported Tony DeVitt in a gig in the north, and he saw something in him and was transported to superstardom. He had a Radio 1 show at the time, which was like the pinnacle of dance music. I mean, it's still huge, but the pinnacle. All over the world, like just a phenomenon. And I remember seeing him. He would have been maybe a couple of years older than me, but he would have been maybe 21 or 2 at the time. And he was a superstar DJ. And I remember looking at him, and he was kind of laughing, just whatever was going on in the car. He was laughing, loving life. That image burnt itself into my mind. Here was me walking along as, you know, a tourist on holidays essentially, but I wanted that, not the car, not the just the life that he had, the life that he was living, the musical life that he had, you know. And I remember thinking, that's a guy from the same feckin' island as me. There weren't many international DJs from Ireland at the time, very few. If he can do that, so can I. And it's funny now because like I know Fergie, and you know we're contemporaries, and he's had a really interesting career path too, but I never actually told him that story. I think this is the first time I've told anyone that story. I'll never forget it. And that was another big, big moment for me that just never left me. Remember that time, Fergie, where he was, how he got there. It just shows, like, if you're in the right place at the right time, provided you put yourself there. If he wasn't standing on that milk crate doing that gig before Tony DeVitt that time, at an age when he shouldn't have been in a club, he wouldn't have been transported to his Radio 1 show to, you know, playing Judgment Sundays or God's Kitchen in Eden in Ibiza, and been ferried around then, you know, in the convertible car, having the time of his life. So, yeah, that was just hugely motivating for me.
It's amazing, John, how them moments can stick with you, and you can go back to that moment and hone in. Like, I remember starting music and I contacted this local artist, Aaron, and I thought I was going to get signed to like fucking shitty records. Like when we went down to Sligo to this recording studio. But I just remember that moment where I was at the mic. Now I couldn't record because my leg was shaking so much. Like I was just unbearably nervous. But I was like, oh, this is it. I care so much about this moment. Like I need to, like whatever is happening here, I need to go run with it. So the moment you looked over and seen that, and I think it does happen to a lot of people, but I think what differentiates like your experience to someone else is you are aware. You were aware of what actually happened in that moment. I think that does happen to a lot of people, but maybe you had the self-awareness, maybe you had the growth in who you are as a person. You're like, oh, that I'm gravitating, like there's a magnetic force I spoke about earlier. I want that. What happened after that?
Well, what happened after that? So we're finished college now at this stage, and I'm doing, the whole DJ agency and earning a living from it. I realized, right, there is a job in this for me. And I was watching what was going on around me. So there were other people I knew who had really successful DJ agencies and companies making a lot of money, and then kind of branching into maybe part owning bars or clubs and all that side of things. That never really attracted me. I've never been driven by the money side of it anyway. And the business side of it wasn't something I enjoyed. I hated doing the accounts.
Who likes doing accounts?
Yeah,
John?
like I hated at 21 years of age being chased by revenue because I didn't file tax returns and thought I was chased by revenue. Not because I was earning a load of money, because I just never did the things I was meant to do, And it could be argued, are you meant to do them or not? Again, another story entirely, different part of my life. But that was never hugely attractive to me. And then I was looking at other people who were, say, playing in clubs like Redbox, Temple Theatre, Pod, places like that. And I wanted that so, so badly. Now, I had no clue how I could marry earning a living with the dance music side of it. And, then there was the carrot on the stick of the financial security, if you like, of the other side. So I just thought, right, well, I have to find a way to keep earning money so that I don't have to get a real job and get to play dance music. So I started to kind of straddle both worlds. And I put myself out there then as a dance DJ, and I started entering competitions. I can remember I won a competition to get a set at Planet Love in Northern Ireland. When would that have been? Maybe 2006, 7, in around that. And that opened massive doors for me, like really, really big. I started getting booked for their events because it went well. So suddenly I was playing the music I wanted to be playing. I kept doing the commercial gigs, and I figured out quite quickly I could do those under the radar, because DJing even back then wasn't like now. Branding wasn't a huge thing. That was only starting to happen. And there was none regarding commercial clubs. You'd just be playing on a Saturday night in Tullamore or whatever, or Galway the next night, or Carlow, whatever it was. Nobody really cared who the DJ was, bar the owner of the club or the manager. They would recognize a good DJ versus one who wasn't. And a good DJ was somebody who sold the nights that sold the most drink, So that was fine. I was still doing that. And then I was picking up other gigs wherever I could. And, foot in the door, doing it for really bad money. But I was getting to associate with a lot of other big DJs who would have been brought into Ireland. And I knew I was good at what I did. And I started to see that they were recognizing it too. So the exposure to these other DJs and managers and promoters was starting to develop into a relationship with some of them. And that was something that, such as when I mentioned Corvin Dalek earlier and his manager Mark Reeder, developed then into something that led me down a different path. So while I was starting to do international gigs and playing dance music, and the same thing here, I was playing in these clubs like Redbox and Pod and supporting DJs like Tiësto or Armin or whoever it might have been, I was still going on a Saturday night to earn my living in the core nightclub in Tullamore.
I think that speaks a lot, John, about, I think, having the understanding as an artist, because everyone that seen you were doing well probably made a scene the supporting Tiësto, but having like no ego, I was like, no, I need to do this, maybe local gig down in, I don't know, Laois or somewhere, to make sure my bread's good, make sure my money's good, in order to keep capitalizing on these opportunities. And I think that also takes a little bit of like killing that ego, because I'm sure when you're on the Kaleidoscope tour with Tiësto, some of the highest highs maybe, but then having to maybe go, now it's still a gig and you're still doing what you love, but was there any of kind of removing the ego, or were you just kind of happy to do it?
No, I was happy to do it. Like I suppose I had a bit of imposter syndrome all along.
Interesting.
Which, not to a huge degree, but I always thought, like, do I really belong here with these icons, these gods? Because I grew up idolizing these people. And all of a sudden I'm sharing the stage with them, and it just feels weird because, you know, like I've learned not to idolize anymore, but if you are idolizing someone, they're no longer human, and you just don't see them in the same way. So they're always going to be there. They're just this machine that just is always there. And I just felt, oh, right, well, like, right, so I'm playing with Tiësto or whatever. I have to hang on to that now. There was a bit of that. I have to just continue to be really good. So there was almost a sense of relief sometimes going back to the comfort zone that I knew. And again, this is just with hindsight looking back. At the time, I didn't think that. But the overarching thing for me was I still enjoyed doing the other gigs. I never dreaded. It did get to a stage where I started to dread doing gigs in bars and those kind of things. And that's when I stopped doing them. Like I had always said, if I stop enjoying it, I'm not doing it anymore. I'll find something else to do. So luckily that happened for me at a stage when I was just about able to earn some sort of living from dance music. And by God, it was touch and go for a long time. But I took the leap. And, you know, there's the old Chinese proverb, leap and the net will appear. I'm a big believer in that. Sometimes you just have to cut the cord and jump. And if you truly believe and feel and you've taken the actions around it, that net will appear and it will catch you, and suddenly you're in a different world. So I don't think I didn't have to quell the ego per se. There wasn't a sense of ego. If anything, it was the opposite way. It was, well, what am I doing here with the bigger gigs? And there was then, we all like a bit of comfort and security, whether we admit to it or not. And there was an element of that with the commercial gigs. But I had started to hate the agency side of it. Now, I mean, hate it with a passion. I was sick of waking up on a Monday morning and getting phone calls from, you know, Paddy in Letterkenny who was given out because DJ X, Y, or Z had played the wrong Britney Spears song. Do you know what I mean? Just stuff like this. Or DJ Mick, his 7th granny in the last year had died and he couldn't go and do a gig, and you're scrambling with an hour to go to cover it. So the crash in 2008, 9, whatever, came, and that whole world started to kind of just shrink and shrink and shrink. So that was my cue to just knock it on the head with no regrets. Massive implications financially, because I was earning a decent living and suddenly I wasn't. But again, leap in the net will appear, and it ultimately did. So long-winded answer to a short question, but ego was never really a part of it. And I still to this day, you can look out at a massive crowd and I would never think that, like, they might be there for me, but they're there for the perception of me, which is channeled through music. They're there for the music that I play or make or whatever it is. They don't know John, who goes home and feeds the dog or, you know, does any of the normal stuff. They're not there for that. And there has always been a separation for me between the onstage persona, which it is, because obviously in daily life I'm very different to what somebody would see on stage or social media, and the real me. And that's where branding came in, because one thing, we just touched on branding earlier on, it wasn't a huge thing when I was making that transition to dance music for DJs. I started to do that very early, not because I was a marketing whiz or anything, because I needed to create a separation. Between
what was that separation?
Pardon?
John, what was that separation? What did that look like?
The separation was, I suppose, the image that morphed into, you know, what I do now. Like, I'm kind of known for wearing glasses all the time, and
the black
hair is long and feminine.
Black outfit.
But I again, quite influenced by Corvin Dalek and his manager at the time, where there was a lot of, say, onstage flamboyance, for want of a better word. I started wearing coloured glasses on stage. I started wearing outfits, you know. I was just experimenting with different things to look different, to stand out visually. Because again, coming from an era when most DJs, it's very different now, EDM changed all that. But back then, most DJs would DJ with the head down. The hand might go up occasionally. But there wasn't an element of theatre to what went on. The theatre would go on with the promoters and the show they would put on, Manumission in Ibiza, stuff like that. I wanted to create, because I was always just attracted to being on stage anyway, did a lot of drama in school, in bands, things like that, and wanted to be front and centre on stage. So the theatre element, the theatrical element, came very naturally to me. I was always very, like, I'd move around a lot on stage. You know, I'd interact at stage dive, believe it or not. You know, things like that.
You stage dive? Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
absolutely. And you'll see the videos still there on YouTube. I stopped
Okay, I
doing
gotta
that
go
when I
find
realised
that.
I was getting beaten up every time. You know, or
What's something?
you'd lose your shoe or something. But yeah, I used to do a lot of that. And again, I think some of that was influenced by growing up watching what went on at rock concerts. You know, and again, watching those bands that my parents were listening to, Def Leppard, Queen, you know, that world, because I've always listened to all styles of music, and I thought, right, well, we don't see any of that in dance music. That will stand out, so I'm going to try it. And it worked. So there was all of this image side of it, and I created a logo. Again, another path I was considering going down career-wise was graphic design, so I was always just attracted by that. And my dad was a landscape architect, so very early on, he had software for creating stuff visually, which I learned, you know. So I was able to do things like create logos kind of before people were doing it. So I just created a brand without really realizing that was what I was doing. So that brand existed over here. And then quietly I was
You are as maybe a person.
without the brand over there and dressed normally and, you know, without glasses and stuff. So it was just this natural kind of evolution as opposed to me sitting down thinking I'm going to do A, B, C, and D.
Good bit there. I was trying to like manage
Sorry,
it.
man, I talk all, like I can't, once you start talking, I can't stop.
No, man, no, yeah, this is great. It's great, man. A couple of things I want to say there. The net, the leap, the take the leap and the net will appear quote. That really stood out to me because I don't know if you're an Indiana Jones fan. I absolutely love Indiana Jones. Yeah. Now, I'm not sure which one it is. I feel like it could be the third one when he's in the temple and he has to take the step and it's to get the Holy Grail. And then once he takes the step, it appears. So that's the same. It's the same same idea and the same something that like always stood out to me and always stuck with me because the adventure, that side of myself, the adventure and just taking a leap. And you know, John, sometimes it doesn't appear.
No, sometimes it doesn't. But Martin,
what you learn.
that's the thing. There's no such thing as failure. You know, there's either success or lessons.
This is true. This is true.
I can almost guarantee, and I will, like, these words will come back and haunt me in the future, but I'll always come back to it. When I'm at a low ebb, I think, what the hell are you saying? It can be hard to believe, but that time where the net doesn't appear and you fall down, you end up in the pit of snakes or whatever it might be. When you look back on that in time to come, you will realize if you hadn't, that was the net. The pit of snakes was the net. You just didn't recognize it at the time. And I know that's quite a philosophical way of viewing things, and it's not easy always to look at things like that. But I do think that's the way the universe works. I think that's the way energetically we are. You know, there's only electricity and magnetism, and it's the relationship between the two. And if we can learn to manipulate that in some way without getting too esoteric about things, that's how we will put ourselves on the path that we want to be on and create the world that we want to exist in. So I think it's not that the phrase is ever wrong, it's always right. We just can't see it because it will present itself in different forms. The net isn't always what's the net look like to you? You're into soccer, so it's the square nets from Italian 90 when you were feckin' 5 years of age, and that's the first time you saw someone score a screamer into the top corner. And a bit like me seeing Fergie driving down the road, that's the time that the soccer fanatic really, the nets were imprinted on their head. And like, what's a net to a guy who grew up on Gili Air in Indonesia, living near the beach? Well, it's whatever he uses to catch fish. Totally different thing. What's the net to somebody who's in a mobile home in Curracloe in Wexford when they're 5 or 6 years of age in the summertime? It could be the net that they bought to catch butterflies. You know, that net looks different no matter who we are or what our perspective is, and it can present itself in different ways. Lots of different nets out there. We just have to kind of learn to recognize them, and sometimes that's where the tough lesson comes in, you know.
Learn to recognize them. That's a gem right there. Learning, like, our perception. What is our perception of the lesson? Like, can we change? And sometimes it takes a lot of depth, a lot of like honesty within yourself to like see the actual lesson. And you don't want to, because John, often, let's see, I want to try and give an example of like something where I messed up. I'm trying to think of something. Usually I'm quick with the examples of when I mess up, but often when something like, even tragic happens. Like
Well,
I've been speaking once or twice just because it did make an impact on me. But I lost my uncle last January, and I wasn't close to my uncle, but I had to fly home back to. I was living in Spain, had to fly back to Ireland, and I had to carry the coffin for the first time, bury the body, and I kind of took. It was my first time, maybe funeral as a man, and then like doing things that like adulthood of that nature. And I flew back to Spain within 3 or 4 days, and didn't deal with it. Boom, shock comes, and I didn't deal with it. It was because at the funeral I wasn't present. I wasn't dealing with any of the emotions. Like I'll never let that ever happen again. Where like death is important because it's a part of life, and I will be at, unfortunately, a lot of funerals in the future because I love so many people and I meet so many great people. And learning when that does happen again in the future, it taught me I need to soak in that. I need to jump into the depths of my conscious, the depths of the emotions that are around me, and just feel it and experience it. Because I'm a comedic guy, John. I like a laugh.
Well aware.
I like a laugh. I do believe humor is one of the keys to joy, happiness in their existence. And when I was at the funeral, I was just kind of humorous about it, like not in a distasteful way, but just in a dealing, a coping mechanism. But that's okay to a certain extent, but not if it takes away from the reality of what's actually happened. And that it did teach me that. It taught me that I need to deal with that. I need to experience them emotions. That net was the shock of it. It was not dealing with that and not going through the motions of grief. Be it I wasn't close to my uncle, but it was still someone that he'd been around for my whole entire life. Like, be it we weren't close, he was always around, just come in for a chat. Or he was a farmer too, for context. Shout out my uncle Pat, man. He was a farmer. He was he was as his mountain, actually, just as a funny bit. When we were at the funeral, I tried to crack a little joke like while I was doing my reading, but it wasn't the audience, John. It was all like farmers. I was like, oh, wrong audience. I was like, let me keep this moving. Yeah, it was quite a moment now. I remember laughing to it with my sister after. But again, just to come back to the point, it's the net, recognizing what the lesson is in something. John, you spoke there, Tiësto, on idolizing and removing maybe idolizing people and the ideation of idolizing someone. It's something that as I've got older, I've kind of, I guess, more that I've been in the environments, and the more belief and the more confidence in the person I become, when I meet people, I'm no longer looking up, but looking across from them. And I think that comes with a lot of experience and understanding how the world works, that no matter what these people accomplish or who you believe they may are, when you meet them, you're looking across from them. They might be a bit taller than you, but you're looking across from them, and they're just humans. They're humans that have put a lot of work into something and invested. But at the end of the day, like, I'm a big believer, we have a lot more common ground with each other than we have not similarities with people. When you started to be around them people, how long did it take you to stop idolizing them?
Not that long, to be honest, because I think because I was involved in promoting gigs as well, so I was involved in booking these DJs from quite early on. You see them in the non-gig scenario straight away. You're picking them up from the airport or whatever it is. You're making sure they're settling in the hotel. You meet them for dinner. You have a chat with them. And obviously you'll resonate better with some than others. So those ones that you resonate well with end up becoming your friends because you're mixing in the same circles. And you just you see the side of them that nobody else ever sees. Most people go to a gig and they see a DJ on stage, and that's pretty much it. Slightly different now, you know, with social media being ubiquitous and so prevalent. But again, that's a very carefully managed image and a scripted image that's presented to the world. So you're seeing the nuts and bolts, and, you know, you'll see that some people have bad moments and they can act like a dickhead, and you see other people that, like, you know, they're really nice or whatever. Most people are nice deep down. But the minute I just, as you say, saw that they were humans, which was very, very, very quickly, again, backstage at a gig, I always think of the first time I played abroad, which was Summer of Love Festival in Pardubice in Czech Republic. And big festival, a bit like, say, a dance version of Electric Picnic over there. massive festival, and I was booked for a pretty good slot. And I remember thinking, I'm only after getting this because my manager at the time has other bigger artists than me, and he was able to wangle me, and that's the way it works. And the imposter syndrome was there. But the minute I got backstage and Carl Cox was playing at that festival, and I just saw him tucking into his grub with the plastic fork and stuff, you know, same as me, and went over and spoke to him about the food, not about DJing, I just thought, like, there's no difference. There's absolutely no difference. Fine, that guy is at a stage of his career that I would love to get to, but that's it. And it was like it suddenly was just stripped away, the facade, and everything became far more real. And all of a sudden, I could see my path to get much more easily to where I want to be. You know, it's achievable. It's not this thing that I can't do.
Inspiration rather than envy or jealousy, maybe, John.
Absolutely,
because
yeah. And
that's what separates someone.
Jealousy's never really been a thing for me. Like, I do not believe that I think that's a very limited and limiting mindset.
Yeah.
And it's something that Ireland has been great for over the years. You know, you wouldn't want to get too big, or, you know, just keeping people down at a level that everybody else thinks they should be at. You know, the big successes for others. But the point I was going to make, I'm after completely losing my train of thought there.
It's all part of it, John. It's all part of the one step at a time.
Maybe this point isn't meant to be made. What were we saying, Martin? I had a really good point to make, and I can't fucking remember.
We're on about idolising people. We're on about chatting. You're chatting with Carl Cox, and obviously the inspiration versus envy. Maybe seeing that path of where you're reaching.
Yeah. The reason jealousy is so limiting, in my opinion, is that it suggests that there's a finite amount of success out there, or things to be achieved, and that we're living kind of in a like a bubble that we can't get out of. Whereas abundance is the complete opposite of that. Like, so what if there are 5 DJs from Carlo who are the 5 biggest DJs in the world? That doesn't mean I can't be the 6th. There isn't a limit on how many DJs from Carlo can be huge, or whatever it is you want to compare. So this comparison thing, you know, like, it's the killer of dreams, I think.
Comparison is the killer of joy, killer of dreams.
There you go. And I think that's true, because if I were to look at the other DJs growing up in Carlo, who were much bigger than me when I was starting off, I would have thought, well, sure, I can't do what he's already playing in the Foundry, and he's already playing in such and such a place, so I'm never going to get a gig there. But that's not the way I thought. But I think if you're jealous, it's very easy to say, well, sure, what's the point anyway? That dickhead over there has that slot that I'd be better in, so I'm not even going to try. And I think, as you say, the killer of joy, that's where the joy is killed in a lot of people. And look, we all, from time to time, feel a little tickle of the green-eyed monster, whatever, because we want to get to certain levels in certain places. But I think if you can be aware of what it is, why it's there, and
why it's there,
and just let it pass through you. Then feel it, let it go. Then you're back in that abundance mindset rather than the limiting one. And I think that's really important, actually. I'm glad you brought that up. And I did eventually get there.
There's one or two things here now, because I'm just aware of our time. There's so many things I want to touch
Look,
on.
I'll keep going. I'm happy enough to keep going if you want to.
Abundance, John. Abundance. There's an artist called Mike, who he's formerly of Mike Studies, a rapper. He's kind of more like a country pop singer now. And he's a great line that, like, I repeat to myself nearly every day. The line is, I woke up, I'm on abundance, my hand's too full to hold the grudges. So it's the idea of, like, there is so much, there's an infinite amount of, okay, before we get too ahead of ourselves in the spiritual realm, of course, some things are finite. Okay, there might be 3 slots at one festival. But yeah, there's like a billion other festivals around the world. Like, when you really jump into the idea of abundance and giving is much like every day. If I come across someone I like, or artist or musician video, straight away I hit them with the DM. I just straight away give what I'm feeling, because it means so much to someone, and it just comes back tenfold. It always comes back. Sometimes it comes back in visible ways, and sometimes it comes back in invisible ways. But the just concept of keep giving, not to the point, like realistic with it too, not to the point where like it drains you, but the idea of give, and it will receive is just something I live by. Like,
Absolutely. And I think that's really important because especially in the worlds in which we exist, there's a tendency to always want to take and only to approach people when you want something for them. And that, you know, that becomes more and more obvious as time goes on. Everybody wants something from everybody. Whereas an uncle of mine told me a strategy that he has used throughout his life. He has the most unbelievable contact base. Like in the way I collect music, he collects contacts almost. And he's a really personable guy and he's just out there. But I remember him saying to me one time, years ago, what he did was he would contact people specifically when he didn't want anything. So let's say he had met up with somebody and they were in a totally different field to him. He would just contact them out of the blue and he might even make up a scenario. Oh, I passed by you in the car in traffic there the other day. I thought I'd give you a buzz. Hope you're well. Hope things are going. Boom. Leave it at that. And I started to use that quite a lot actually. And I find it makes such an impression. To go one step further, which is what you described, is to give somebody, you know, express gratitude for what they have given you. I really love that song. I wasn't aware of you before. It's amazing. Thanks for putting it on my radar.
So meaningful, man.
End of story. Don't want
So
to. You might never contact them again. But what it does is changes your mindset, certainly. It puts you in a different, I think, in a different energetic realm and on a different energetic path, which is one towards abundance. Because if you are not giving, you're not going to get something back. Maybe it's a karmic rule of the universe. I don't know what it is. But, you know, for every action, there is a reaction. So if you put a positive action out there, you know, you put that electricity out there, the magnetism will draw, you know, something back towards you as well. And like does attract like. So if you put energetically and electrically out there something positive, and I mean, gratitude is probably one of the highest energetic vibrations you can, something's going to magnetize back towards you in the positive realm. And it might be, you might never recognize what's happened. But if you keep doing it, and as you say, like, you don't become a doormat. And I know that's not what you mean, but it's just put that positivity out there, as long as it's genuine. If it's not genuine, don't bother. If you're having a shit day, don't bother. You know, because again, the universe knows. The universe
can't lie to the universe.
Works in vibrations, and that's it. It knows what you're radiating. And if you're like, you can put the words out there, fine, but they won't reach their target, and it won't magnetize back to you if the energy is wrong.
It's like throwing a dart but not knowing where the dartboard is.
Exactly. Yeah. So just don't bother. Save your energy. Put it into something else. Maybe it's self-care to ensure that tomorrow's a better day. Whatever it might be, use the energy for yourself at that point. Because I think if you're not radiating yourself or vibrating at a high enough level, there's no point putting your energy out there, because all you're going to attract is more of the same back to you. You know, misery loves company.
Great. It's true.
So there's abundance.
John, there's something about gratitude I want to touch on there, just because I think I only really learned it recently. I've always believed in gratitude, but I think I was just maybe using the wrong methods in which I was using it. I've come to learn that gratitude is not when you feel bad, oh, think of all the great stuff and whatnot. Like, you should be thankful for. You should. And I think that's my mistake. I was like, well, I should be thankful for this. I should. Instead of, so if I'm having a bad day now, instead of like feeling, well, I should be thankful, I have all this lovely food, I just went for a jog. I was like, wait, let me think of what that makes me feel like first. So when I went for a jog, how did that make me feel? Well, it made me feel good, and I feel emotions. My family's healthy. How does that make me feel? It makes me feel good. I'm thankful for that. It's not guilt tripping yourself into being gratitude. It's looking at what's in your life and how does that make you feel? Because if you have great things in your life and they make you feel good, you can jump into them. Just like when we have bad thoughts and we've bad memories. If we jump into them bad memories, we feel bad. But if we jump into the happy memories, then there's a sense of joy, there's a sense of peace, a sense of love, warmth. Warmth is a big one I'm on. That sense of warmth in the belly. So that's just something I've been trying to learn with gratitude. One thing I want to ask you, John, you spoke about tomorrow might be a better day. You have a quote here I want to read you. Now, 1 second here. tomorrow is not a new day. There's a new moment. There's a new hour. So instead of maybe the concept of not, tomorrow is a new day, obviously, but instead of like, well, tomorrow's another chance. Let me see if I can make this next minute or this hour into something. And that's something, even before we came on, you asked me how my morning was going. I had a bit of a funny morning. I wasn't feeling good. And in the past, I would have that was the defeat. I would have ended my day there. I would have cancelled this podcast. If this was 3-4 years ago, I would have cancelled it, made something up, it's like, oh, and spent the day in bed. But instead, finishing that 2 minutes and then jumping on to the next 2 minutes and what I can make that in the next hour. And then 2 hours later, I'm having an incredible experience with an incredible person. So that quote really hit me.
Isn't that the essence of creating? You have created that day for yourself. And I mean, day being the human construct of this so-called linear time or whatever. But what you've described is kind of the flow state and how everything flows into it. So, right, let's concentrate in the next second. What am I going to do in the next second, in the next minute? And then suddenly you look around you and your whole mood, your whole demeanour, your whole day has completely changed. And it's gone from lying in bed all day, as you would have 4 years ago, to a productive, higher vibration. And gratitude's a huge part of that. So it ties in really well there, I think, as well. Like, you're not going to believe this. Like, just sitting here.
Hey, on my journal. One second, you got yours. Let me get mine. 1 sec, let me get mine.
This is not set up.
I got mine here too.
Yeah, and it's like, I'm going to open this, right? Because exactly, I think what you said was quite profound regarding how does it make you feel, right? I have something in the studio just above, above the workspace, so it's right there in front of me all the time. How does it make you feel? Literally those words. And that's what I apply to music. If I'm feeling this, I keep going. If I'm not, scrap it. You know what I mean? How does it make you feel? Has to make me feel something. So, like, what I have in this some of it seems so trivial. It's not all the big stuff, like you say, that I'm so grateful that I was brought into this world and this universe, and grateful to, my mother for going through the pain of childbirth, etc., etc. Fine, you can be grateful for all those things. But, like, listening to 5 minutes of an audiobook. That was one of them from yesterday. And I remember because there was a particular phrase, I can't remember what the phrase was, but there was something that lifted me out of it. I was having a bad moment or whatever. And that phrase just, like you say, just lifted me out of it a little bit. That went in the in the gratitude diary. Receiving a text from a particular person. That's all it was. Just hadn't heard from them in a while. Like, it was, that's the type of thing that goes in. Sometimes it'll be grateful for the cup of tea I had 5 minutes ago. Why is that gone in there? Because that day, that's what I genuinely was grateful for. It doesn't have to be the big, massive stuff all the time. Because all we are is, the big things are just a collection of the small things. Anyway, we just tend to focus on the big stuff. And like people, you read an obituary and, oh, they won the Nobel Prize for this and they won, this, that and the other. Yeah, but how did they get to that point where they won the Nobel Prize? What were the small things that led them there? Because there had to have been a multitude of them. And they were the more important sums that went into the greater whole, in my opinion. So that's what the gratitude diary does for me. It allows me to focus on the smaller stuff that we forget about a lot, that we don't think is important. And no matter how bad a day I've had, and like in the past couple of years, I went through some fairly tough times on a personal level. That's why I started doing the gratitude diary. It's the thing I do last thing at night, every night. No matter how bad that day was, there will be stuff that goes into this. It could be the tiniest things, but there'll be something. So that keeps you going, or keeps me going anyway.
John, I want to get you another quote. Well, first off, it's an interesting one. I'll keep it a book. Let's go jump out of what is it when you're in a movie and the person starts chatting to the camera? I can't remember what's that called when it goes third
like
person.
A monologue or yeah.
When it switches and you're in the movie now. Mm-hmm. It's having a conversation in a podcast. It's so interesting because like you're in the conversation. So like I'm trying to take it all in, and then you say something, and then I'm trying to present the next little bit to continue on. Yeah. So it's a weird one, man. It's a weird one. But yeah, man, they're very special words, and especially you just saying like a cup of tea or the text. It's them small moments. They compound. That's what makes a great day. Sure. if a song does like 1 million streams, or you get a placement, or something big happens, maybe in a relationship or something, that's incredible. But usually a great day is just them little things throughout the day. It was like you woke up, maybe you were feeling good. You maybe exercised, you got that text from someone that you care about, and you're like, wow, that means a lot. And you give it, I feel, if you can give the gratitude, the thankfulness, and the meaning to them small things, if you can give the meaning to them things and really see them for what they are, like if you can just see them, I think, me personally, it's like one of my things is trying to see things for what they really are. Like, I suppose anyone who listens this deep in, I have no problem saying, but sometimes when I'm walking through the streets, I'll look at people as they're walking past, and I'll imagine like their souls, or I'll imagine like their energy. I'm like, oh, I wonder where are they going? Like, what's actually happening right now?
I can relate to this so much. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what's actually happening? Like, okay, I can switch into like back to reality and see the person going to get the coffee, but I'm step back and going, I wonder where they're going though. I wonder what's happening and why they're here right now. And that means a lot to me, because it's the same when you look at nature. We can look out and see the lovely tree, or we can see what the tree is actually doing for us, and the energy it's giving and the healing it's giving and whatnot.
Oh, totally. And then there's the kind of converse of that as well. Like, it's funny, you know, when we're doing what we do, I suppose, as artists, and if there's some sort of a public image or profile to project through social media or whatever it is. Let's say you're having a really bad day, right? And recently I had some really bad days. The hardest thing in the world can be to put that mask on, that fake thing. So like, I will continue to post online the good stuff, the fun stuff, the happy stuff, you know, and oh sure, look, he's flying it. He's the greatest life ever. Whereas if you strip away the social media, and if you had looked at, say, the last couple of weeks for me, that's not how I'd been feeling at all. But I remember walking down the road just the other day, and I was feeling really, really dark and bad. I was just having a bad time. And I remember thinking, as I passed other people, I wonder what they think of me now. Am I projecting how bad I feel to them? Because on social media you can project whatever you want. It's almost like there isn't an energetic charge to that, but in person there is. So you go past people and they might be smiling, they might be happy, but sometimes you'll feel something else from them. And I often wonder, how am I projecting that? Because again, to come back to what we were saying earlier, it kind of snapped me out of it on that particular day, because I remember thinking, right, if I am resonating this negative vibration and energy, even if they're not picking up on it, something out there is. It could be the tree. You know, it could be the building, whatever it is, the universe. Well, what am I magnetically going to attract back? That. And that is this, i.e. feeling bad. I don't want more of this. And it's funny how that perspective that you've just described, we can flip it and use it to almost help ourselves. Can't always do it. Doesn't always work. Sometimes, like, you're just having a shit day and that's it. It's hard to make out of it. But it's amazing just to... I thought it was the only one. I remember another, Martin, sorry for going off. It's not really a tangent,
flow.
I remember another moment, very, very young. I was in the back of the car, driving past the cathedral in Carlow. I so specifically remember this. I must have been 9 or 10. And just seeing people walking around. And it was the first time I consciously remember thinking about this. Like, what are they doing? What's that person thinking? Is that person even real? Or do I just see them? Like, that person's wearing a red hat. Is my mum in the front of the car when she looks at that person? A, does she even see them?
Yeah.
B, is the hat red to her? Like,
is that person ever going to even exist in her perception
in
of
her
reality?
world? And I know we hear a lot
seconds.
now about simulation theory and NPCs and all this now. But like, why would a child be thinking that? There must be something there that we don't understand. And I think it comes back to us being able to create our world. Maybe, Martin, if the two of us walk down the street, you don't see the same people as me. And I know that sounds absolutely ridiculous. There's probably people shouting at the screen now. Who's
not
this,
really, though, John, when you think about it, though.
Lunatic, like, but
because what you're saying is, when we walk down the street, because of our experiences and how we've shaped, we're not looking at the same things the same way. We're just not.
That's the thing. We're
we
certainly
can look
going
at
to perceive things differently.
Yeah, we'll perceive like so differently. And I might like, just even if you want to like spiritual or just like how we perceive reality, I might like red Doc Martens, right?
Yeah.
Thus, I focus on the red Doc Martens and see a person, and that person is a slight memory in my like. You don't focus on that. You're seeing your perception of everything is just totally different.
Yeah. It's like the witnesses to a car crash. Like the police will say, right, well, we've 20 witnesses. Each one of them had a completely different description of the one singular event that went on. So it could be just the perception of the one event that materially happened. It could be that materially things actually change on an energetic level. So each person's perception was actually materially correct for them. It could be, there could be all kinds of different strata and layer, and it could be, look, we could talk about all kinds of things there, you know, multiverses and different timelines and stuff. But I think that the bottom line, the point is, we do get to choose our own perception of things.
Yeah,
and we can either allow our subconscious to drive that, or we can learn to become more aware and, you know, challenge our subconscious and change it to the point where our subconscious is then driving our conscious thought and perception of things in the way that we want to lead to where we want to go, as opposed to drifting along. And, you know, what stays stuck inside here is going to come out in one way or another eventually. So let's say we've some buried trauma. If we don't face up to it at some point, it will manifest in some way. And it could be through our personalities, it could be in a sickness, an illness, or whatever. We might never, like, there might be universal plausible deniability, and that will never link that disease that we got to something that happened 20 years ago, psychologically. But that is how things work. That's how I believe things work. So it's so important that we do that kind of shadow work, the inner child work, if you like, and face up to the challenges that are buried deep within us, because we are, you know, our current day today is informed subconsciously by everything that's come before it. So I just think it's very important, and that's where plant medicines have really helped me to kind of attack the stuff I've been too scared to face. And some of, like, it's not scary stuff if I describe it. Like, a big one for me is my first day in school. My first day in school informed, it was traumatic for me at the time. It was that separation from my mom, etc., etc. And I've done a lot of work on that over the years, and that has led to a lot of my reacting in an extreme way to a lot of situations regarding, say, separation or abandonment, or, you know, issues in adult life. But the fact that I'm aware of that and I know how it's linked to, and I can relate certain feelings that I have as an adult to that exact feeling that I can remember like yesterday. I can still feel it when I think about it. The only way I could have got to some, and that sounds quite superficial, but for me it's not, you know. So it doesn't have to be some massive, like, thing that we would all, like a big car crash or huge death, or, you know, something like that. It doesn't always have to be that. It's whatever happened in our reality
and how you perceived it, how you felt about it.
I have found that plant medicine, ayahuasca in particular, helped me to get really deep down to the layers that I personally, without realizing it subconsciously, was too afraid to scrape away. And suddenly when it comes out, it can be incredibly freeing. You know, it doesn't mean we won't go through bad times. It doesn't mean that my body doesn't remember and doesn't react in the same way to certain things. It does. But awareness is the first step, you know, on the journey to freedom, I think. So it's, I don't know how we got to that point, but
yeah,
I'll end the monologue there, Mark.
It's interesting, John, because I had a guy called Gary Patterson on 2 weeks ago. Really good listen. We chatted about like holistic health, yoga, meditation, the old inner dimension, ayahuasca and whatnot. It's something I would want to do, and this is great that we're chatting about it. And I actually beforehand, I was actually thinking something that I was going to say to you. But on during the week sometimes, right, if I'm tired, so I quit coffee back in January, which was tough, no headaches or anything, just so sleepy all the time, just so sleepy. But definitely big on the naps, and I'll have like a 15-minute nap around 1 o'clock or something. And man, when I have my naps, I'm able sometimes, probably more than meditation, and I don't do when I go to sleep for whatever reason, because when I want to go to sleep at nighttime, for the most part, I fall asleep like a baby and have a good night's sleep for the most part. So it's not something I would do, but for whatever reason, when I have a nap, I'm able to like really slide into my subconscious and go into situations to how I actually felt in my mentality while it was happening, and also like others, how that made others feel. But for whatever reason, I went back to 2016, and around my 2016 to like 2020, which is funny, when the same time I would have met you, John. I had like 4 years of like just complete identity crisis, of like just intrusive thoughts and completely losing who I was and who I believed I was, and just mayhem of self-identity. And I hated the person I was. Now, when I say that, I wasn't acting any differently. So like I didn't treat anyone any differently, and like to the naked eye, like I didn't really do anything any differently. But every day I was a different person. I was like trapped in living hell, essentially. And again, that sounds, I don't want to blow out of proportion. Everyone has their own difficulties. But for me, it was living hell. It really was living hell. And every day, this guilt of intrusive thoughts, like it was like someone... I've had some nightmares about it. Well, actually, yeah, it was like, the only way I explain it was like the devil getting his hand and just squeezing my belly and really like putting his nails in. And it was really horrible. So when I went into this nap, I'm someone who's always trying to heal and grow and whatnot. But when I was having this nap, I went into that time period and only realized how scared I actually am to face that time. Because I went into how it felt and like them emotions, and it was horrible, John. I really couldn't. I had to wake up. I couldn't actually go into it. So it made me realize when I had my nap, I was like, damn, I'm so scared to go down there. I'm still scared to go down there, and I don't know when I'm going to be able to go down there. But I know I will. I will at some point, but I just don't know when I'm going to be able to go down there.
I can totally relate to that. And one of the reasons that I found the ayahuasca ceremonies that I've done to date really good was, I think it's really important that the environment, I mean, you don't just go and get some ayahuasca and, neck it and go about your day. Like, it's very, very important that you're in an environment where it's treated with the respect it deserves. There's nothing recreational about it. It can be tough. It tends to be a teacher that gives you what you need as opposed to what you want. And that can be difficult. And for some people it is love and joy, and for others it isn't. It depends what you need at that time. But when you're in the ceremonial environment with people who know what they're doing, and this is what they do, that is very different, I think, from what most people, if they, like, I've done psilocybin ceremonies as well. Most people probably listening or watching, if they've experienced psilocybin, it's magic mushrooms out in the field or in someone's house or whatever, and you might have a good trip, you might have a bad trip. It's not done for personal growth, development, self-awareness or anything like that. And that can be quite damaging to a lot of people. Whereas in the ceremonial environment, it's not about that. You've guides, you've people who are monitoring, your journey and where you are on the journey. They can guide you in and out of it in waves, as opposed to you getting caught up in deep try. If you need a break from something that might be going on, they can guide you out of it, and then when you're ready again, bring you back in. That is so important when I think when it comes to any of this really deep subconscious work, using plant medicine, because it is a medicine. If you're going to use medicine, you got to be careful about it.
Respect. People experience.
You're not going to go and take 20 tramadol just because you have a headache. You know what I mean? That's ridiculous. And it's the same with plant medicine. And they are teachers. And I know a lot of people won't be able to relate to this, but I'm just speaking from personal experience. And if you approach it in the right way, it's certainly not drugs. Yes, there are psychedelic properties and psychedelic effects. But anytime I have gone back, like I've done a number of ayahuasca ceremonies, so I've used it maybe 5 times and psilocybin a couple of times. It has almost like, it's felt like a journey or a voyage to the same place every time. So the best way I can describe going under the ayahuasca ceremonies is like you get in a car and you go on a journey somewhere. And let's say I drive to you in Dublin, Martin, and I've never been in your house before. And then 6 months later, you invite me up and, we're meeting up again. It's me driving back to that place for the second time and the third time, but it's not a place that I see in the conscious realm on any other day. It's like this place that I can only go to, but it is the same place. And you encounter different parts of your psyche, and like it's multifaceted. It's like there's a sense of synesthesia in it for me, and you can hold 2, 3, 4 disparate thoughts at the same time without cognitive dissonance. Things make sense in a way that they don't make sense in this so-called 5-sense reality that we're in right now. And provided you set intentions and you go into it, you know, with a kind of purity of thought, and you're looking to gain, either way you're going to get a lesson one way or another. You choose what you do with that lesson, but it's going to come. So that, you know, the net might be the net, or it might be the snake. The snake.
Yeah, good. No, I like that. That was nice, John. That was nice there.
It's going to be there. But if you go in with the right intentions, you are going to. I have always come out of it. I can't speak for anyone else. With profound learning and lessons that I can then take with me forward in the conscious realm. So I would never say to anybody I recommend doing this or I don't recommend it. Each to their own. People will often say something like ayahuasca calls you. I have a sense of that. I haven't done a ceremony in probably it's 2 years, heading for 3 years now at this stage. At some point it might call me again, it might not, but when it does, I'll answer the call, because I've learned so much. And it doesn't mean that my life is a bed of roses after it. Far from it. Sometimes what it has opened up in me is access to shit that's been buried for a long, long time. And you know, if you open a wound, sometimes you need to reopen a wound to clean the wound, or sometimes a bone needs to be rebroken so it can be set properly. Some of the work is a bit like that, and it's opened up stuff in me that has been really, really difficult. And I'm thinking, why the fuck didn't I just leave that? Why didn't I leave it buried? But you can't leave it buried, because as we said earlier, it will manifest in some other way, and you might even know that's why it is. So for me, there's no downside. You know, you do it in a group, or I have always done it in a group setting, and you're still aware of what's going on around you. So there are other people, and they're going through all kinds of different things, and some are crying and some are laughing, and you know, some are going through extreme traumas. But to a person, and you'll have integration sessions afterwards, and people will discuss what's going on, and you share. So I'd say maybe 70 to 100 different people I've had that experience with in the room. Nobody, not one person has come out of it. And I've heard some of the trauma going on, like next to me has come out and said, I regret that, I wouldn't do it again. Not one person. I'm sure they're out there. But I think if I really want to go deep, I find plant medicine extremely useful for that. And it's tough. It's not always tough. Sometimes it is. But, you know,
sometimes it's essential, maybe.
It is. For me, it's been essential. Absolutely.
John, you said something there about wounds. I heard a very good quote recently, that our wounds and gifts are next door neighbors. And it really stood out to me, because my gifts are my wounds. Like, they really are. Like, I wouldn't be the person I am. I wouldn't be someone who wants to grab onto life as much if I didn't realize what it's like to lose my grip on life. And so that's just something, that
very relatable. Yeah.
John, I want to touch on a few more things, and then
let's do it
again. I'm obviously going to go through maybe a few more things, and then I'll probably maybe finish off on some highs with music and stuff. But there's something that really stuck out to me when I was doing some research, maybe because not the direct relatability, but having been surrounded or been in close proximity to some relationships that unfortunately have gone their separate ways after a long period of time. You spoke about in a podcast about being in a relationship for 7 or 8 years, and then all of a sudden vanished, like all of a sudden not vanished, but it just collapsed, and that was that. You also spoke about maybe getting some help after that to deal with it. What was going through the process of almost losing a limb? Like, because often with relationships, and especially for relationships that last that long, 7 or 8 years, they're a part of us. They're almost like an extra organ, and then all of a sudden that organ's not working anymore. It's not there. Was there a sense of identity in the relationship, or what was that process of healing maybe still from it?
It's a really good question, a really deep one too, because the relationship in question there was a gradual loss of identity during it, and the only really way to describe it is to be honest about it. There was an addiction issue within the relationship that manifested during the relationship, and I mean I've spoken about. I mean I don't do drugs and drink. So look, it was a really and look, who hasn't come into some sort of contact with with addiction? Certainly in this country, it's absolutely everywhere. I didn't realize it was until suddenly I was staring it in the face. Like I didn't know how prevalent it was, and I had to get help for my side of it as well. But I would go further. It wasn't just when you're in a relationship for a long time. Obviously, part of your identity does become wrapped up in the other person, and that can be extreme in some cases. It wasn't in mine because I always held on to a degree of independence, and I always maintain my own person, and that's just the way I am. Like I don't believe you can be in a couple, but it's important, in my opinion, to be two individuals within the couple and still retain who you are. There's lots of compromise, there's lots of crossover, but I think if two people become so entwined, then that's not necessary. For me, that would be a recipe for disaster. I have to retain my own sense of identity. So I had always done that. But when the other person is on such a different journey to what you're doing, I found I was trying to chase the connection that was no longer possible. And when there's addiction in a relationship, in my experience, there's a third person in the room, and that third person is so much stronger than anything I can ever be. So like you're in a relationship and you are the primary person to the other person, outside of themselves. This third entity, it's not even a person, this third entity in the room is, you talked about the devil earlier, and the devil reaching into the pit of your stomach and nearly ripping out. That's the kind of strength that addiction has over somebody who is in the throes of addiction. So the person that loved you might still love you, but they love this other entity way, way more. And as that becomes stronger and stronger and stronger, and that's fed, and the time and the effort is put into that relationship, this other one, which is the one that I'm still trying to live and hang on to, is pushed further and further away. And that manifests in so many different ways for so many different people. But that's really, really difficult, because at that point I started to lose a sense of my own identity. Then I became codependent and almost addicted to the addict or the addiction itself. And I remember the first time somebody said that to me, do you know what, John, you're addicted to the addiction. I lost my mind. I was there. How dare you? I was offended by it. I don't get offended very easily, but I was actually offended by that. How dare you? That's that person's problem. But I now know in hindsight, having come out the other end, I was addicted. My life had become about surviving the addiction, trying to fix the addict. I had absolutely no control over any of that. I never could have. But I think understandably fell into the trap of trying, because you're trying to get back to where you were before. You're trying to
rescue. You're trying to rescue or save.
You're romanticizing that person, and that person is no longer that person, and will never be. I mean, they say about addiction, you've the person before addiction, you've the person during addiction, and if the person recovers, which hopefully they do, you've another person after addiction. There's a third person, and that third person after addiction might not be compatible with you. You might have been compatible with the first person. You're never going to be compatible with the second, and you might not be with the third, and quite often aren't. So yeah, like that was a really, really traumatic time, but I did a huge amount of work both during and afterwards. And we talk about, again, we'll come back to Indiana Jones and the net. I fell into the pit of snakes at that point, but that was actually my net, because I couldn't have continued to exist. When I look back now on the chaos that I lived in, and this isn't me in any way. I've no anger towards the other person, like in the same way as I would have no anger towards somebody who got dementia and had to be looked after. It's fine, there are choices made in addiction, but the control that this third person up here has over the addict is just for someone who's never been an addict. It's indescribable, it's unfathomable. And once I learned to stop trying to fathom it, to stop trying to apply my logic, my map of the world to that person and what they were going through, that's when I started to get some sort of peace with it. Because there is no logic to addiction. I mean, people don't really know what it is. Some say it's a disease, some say it isn't. Nobody really knows. There's no real cure for it. People can learn to live with it and manage it, and they can have incredibly productive lives. But you know, it's one in a million who will suddenly just snap out of it. It just doesn't work that way most of the time. So I learned so much about myself. It brought up so much stuff for me. Again, going back to the first day of school, a lot of stuff was brought up by first the abandonment I felt within the relationship, the anger that I then felt as a result of that, the trying to come to terms with the anger, you know, just all these stages. I went through profound grief as a result of it for the loss of the relationship, but during the relationship as well, because I knew there was no way, there was no hope for this. But I was too addicted myself to the person, to the situation, to this life that I was living, to walk away. I just wasn't able to walk away. Very few people I've since discovered do walk away from that, because you're still clinging on to what was there before and the romanticization. And I even have to be careful now sometimes, not to remember what it was like during the shit. And there was a lot of fucking shit, excuse the language, but you have to remember that, because that's part of the reality. If you start to forget that, you lose a grip on reality, and suddenly I might find myself, like, let's say if in the future I'm in a new relationship or whatever, I might find myself romanticizing again. You have to be realistic. I have to take the lessons that I learned, the boundaries that I've now learned to set. I have to take those on.
So important.
You know,
so
like,
important.
and that's been one of the most difficult things for me, is boundaries, because I lost all sense of boundaries during that experience. And again, I say all this not to in any way have a go at the other person, who I'm no longer in contact with. And, you know, I hope she's living a productive life, and I don't know one way or another, but I hope she is. But do I regret any of that? No, not at all, because I feel that whatever's to come next for me, I am so better equipped to look after my needs within a relationship or outside of a relationship as well. I'm far less afraid to face up to the hard work that's sometimes needed.
Your mental toolbox, John, you spoke about before.
Toolbox, exactly. That's what it is. Like that whole experience has equipped me with a toolbox, and I'm not afraid to use those tools now, you know, and I take them out and I make sure they don't get rusty. And, you know, like I will still go to counselling, or I'll talk to people if I'm feeling good, you know, because that relationship doesn't make me feel bad anymore. You know, I've got over that relationship, but it reminds me of servicing a car. You know, I mean, most of us will only bring the car to the mechanic when something goes wrong. Whereas if you get the car serviced a couple of times a year, things tend not to go wrong with the car. And I just take that approach to counselling or therapy or whatever people do. I just think if you keep that tune up going, you'll just continue to, you know, you'll manage things much better. Or I will. I keep saying you. This is my experience. I know everybody is not the same. So
very relatable though, John. Like, if there's anything I learned from doing the podcast, it's often like the things that people most relate to are things that we wouldn't even see. Okay, we see it as importance in our life, but we don't see it as I should tell people that because they might find power in it too. We usually think of bigger things maybe, or things that like we may perceive as different, but often it's just normal human things that we all go through and we have like all experienced that has the biggest relatability. And like on the podcast, I'll be telling little stories that like are just part of your life, but they're the stories like that have the most relatability, because everyone goes through something. As you said, someone might not go through what you went through, but someone could definitely take something from that and definitely know someone or has been affected in maybe one way that like, yeah, that's what it feels like. That's
exactly.
What it
and
really
as you
feels
touched
like.
on earlier, Martin, there aren't like there's a tendency for us to kind of compare and to almost belittle some other people's experiences. Oh, well, they didn't go through as much as me, or that's complete and utter nonsense. Whatever you've gone through in your life, whatever the biggest thing you've gone through is the biggest thing you've gone through. And just because somebody else has gone through something that's perceivably bigger on the outside looking in, it doesn't in any way
take away from it.
Take away from or change the effect that your thing had on you, you know. So it's, again, it comes back to our perception. It comes back to wondering what, like, the color red, does that person see green or red? You know, it's all these degrees of perception, and it doesn't matter. Like, let's say the first day of school, my brothers weren't affected by their first day of school to any degree at all, to my knowledge, in the way that I was, and that had a resonance for me. And that wasn't anyone's fault. That wasn't the teacher's fault. It wasn't my mother's fault. That's just the situation I found myself in, that I reacted in that particular way to. And it probably goes back to earlier. Like, we could go deeper again. And I was, you know, a breech baby, and the umbilical cord was wrapped around me, and I was trapped in the womb, and there, you know, so probably an attachment issue then in infancy as well. And when that cord then was severed on that first day of school, I'm just looking around me thinking, what the hell is going on, you know? So, and ayahuasca took me on kind of a rebirth experience that showed me some of this and allowed me to connect different things that have helped me. It doesn't matter if that is actually what went on. It's just something that made sense to me in the journey, you know? So I think it's really important that people, if they're going on a journey, particularly if it's a grief journey or a loss journey, or, you know, one of the hard journeys that they're on, that they don't belittle or demean what they're feeling themselves at any given time. Because if you're feeling it and it's real to you, and you will have people who'll kind of be in your ear and say, oh, well, nobody's died. Well, no, nobody's died. But I'll be honest, one of the thoughts that would have popped into my head at certain times would have been easier if somebody had died, because then I would have some sort of closure. There'd be a logic to it. There'd be this, that, and the other. Now, I've since learned that that's, you know, that doesn't make sense. That's illogical thinking on my part. And I don't say it in a flippant or frivolous way to say that, Jesus, I'm not trying to demean somebody's experience of death. That's just me being blatantly honest and saying that crossed my mind at times. It would have felt, it probably wouldn't, but I perceived it at the time as that would have been easier. But that's only because I was so caught up in feeling so bad at the time. Anything would have been preferable. So you could have presented any scenario in front of me, and I would have, well, I can't feel worse than this, so I'll take that choice. And look, it could have been way worse, and probably would have been, but that's where I was at the time. So it's just,
and it's not
really
beating yourself up, John.
Pardon?
It's not beating yourself up for feeling like that. That was the reality.
You have to give yourself a break sometimes. I'm not great at that at times, but it's something to work on. You have to sometimes not be as harsh on yourself as we often are.
To treat ourselves like we treat our best friend. To treat ourselves like we treat our best friend. John, I'm going to bring things a bit lighthearted. I'm going to bring things up to a lighthearted to finish us off in our last couple of minutes and whatnot. I do a section of, again, no, I always got it. That was beautiful. First of all, I've always crossed over. That was beautiful. No, it was, man. I think the level of honesty and purity in your words is not only relatable, but it's always refreshing. It's refreshing for someone to hear that honesty. And in a world where there's so much BS, honesty always shines through. So I really appreciate you sharing all that. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Now, John, to the quick questions. Now, this is a little section I do on the podcast called Quick Round Questions. Boom, 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 boom. Quick fire questions. So I just have some funny questions here. Just one word answers, whatever you feel you would like to answer. So first question is, favorite ice cream?
Don't eat ice cream.
Don't eat favorite sweets?
Don't eat sweets.
Favorite fruit?
Peach.
Mine's banana. I love bananas. Last thing you ate?
Homemade pizza last night.
Incredible. Favorite Celtic player of all time?
It's got to be Henrik Larsson.
Henrik Larsson. Interesting. Shout out Henrik Larsson, Barcelona legend. Favorite snooker memory?
Favorite snooker memory is the first time I managed to get a break of 8, i.e. pot the black ball after a red.
Class.
In the Ivy Room Snooker Club in Carlow.
Class.
That's my favourite snooker memory. Yeah.
Class. Favorite snooker player of all time?
That's Ronnie O'Sullivan, hands down.
Ronnie, shout out my boy Ronnie. I met Steve Davis. I've met Steve Davis twice. Cool dude, real cool dude, Steve Davis. Yeah, very nice guy. Very nice guy. If you could meet anyone dead or alive, who would you meet?
Freddie Mercury we didn't mention him earlier, but in terms of on-stage performance, I don't know if anyone can ever top him. He's the person who resonated most with me. Would have loved to see him live, never did. And I just think he's a really interesting character as well.
Favorite movie of all time?
The Truman Show.
The Truman Show.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in that movie buried deep inside.
Yeah, Truman Show.
More a documentary, I think, than a movie. They Live would be my second.
What would be your second?
They Live.
They Live. I haven't seen They Live.
A B movie from, I don't know when it was made, late 80s, early 90s. Rowdy Roddy Piper is the
wrestler.
Of it. Yeah, and it's a John Carpenter directed movie, and like John Carpenter came out years later and said like this is a documentary, not a movie. I would recommend that anyone watches it. It's a really shit movie.
Is it like The Room? Is it like The Room? Is it?
Yeah, like in the way that B movies are, but it's incredible, and the layers of truth that are in there as well. Like it's, for me, it's an allegorical movie, so that'd be the second one.
Very good way of putting it. And last but not least, John, what are you doing after this?
I'm going into the studio, would you believe?
Love it.
I also have to cut the grass today at some point, and I have to, which seems strange in the middle of the summer, install the stove in my new studio because the weather's dry and it's best for doing it now. So,
well, John, you spoke about, you know, if you were to wait till it's wet and rainy outside to do it, then that's probably not the best time. As you said about the car, and the same with your fire. It's good to have it ready when it's nice and warm outside.
Exactly.
John, I was going to finish it because it'd be wrong not to ask you just about this, but man, as we went through all your trajectory of your journey, your ups and downs, your DJing production career, I didn't mention but radio shows from Spain to other radio shows you've done. Would you say you were in chapter 3 when you started getting the hits with Hot Stepper and such? Would I lie to me? And you'd been through so much, man. You'd been, as you spoke about it, the best artist in my opinion. Like, I'm like longevity artists, legacy artists are my favorite artists because I see, and they always have been. That's why I love like Hove or Fat Joe or 50 or M or Marshall. I like a lot of new rappers, but I'm sitting back and I'm like, look, I was like, who's going to be here 20 years from now? What rappers, what artists are going to be here 20 years from now? And I said in an interview, I was like, maybe it was a bit ignorant, but I was just super confident. I was like, I'm not here for 5 years. Like, I'm not like my career. I'm not going to look at myself in 5 years and make a decision on my career. My career is, I'm here for 20. And that's even when the mother asked me, how long am I doing the podcast for? I was like, my life. Yeah. I don't plan on stopping the podcast. So you're in maybe chapter 3 of your career, been through so much as a person, highs, lows, maybe financially of the music industry. And then, did you know that like that was around the corner? You're about to get some of your biggest hits.
No, I didn't know. I wanted that to be the case. And I had been experimenting with more commercial side of things. You know, it was like Calvin Harris and David Guetta kind of kicked down the door and made it acceptable within dance music to like blend genres and be more commercial about it. And because I was always into pop music and rap and all, like everything, this was like manna from heaven for me. So suddenly it was like validation for wanting to get poppier with dance music. So that's when I started to do the more commercial stuff. And I was building up a body of work, which I cringe now if I listen back to some of those demos. But at the time, that's the stage I was at. And I was trying to learn how to make pop music essentially, but with that dance slant. I had no clue that the likes of PYT or Hot Step or some of that stuff was around the corner. But there was one particular track that managed to get signed to Good Soldier Records in the UK, which just opened up all the doors. And because it did pretty well, and it got a lot of radio play in the UK and some personal milestones, the likes of being on BBC for the first time, BBC One for the first time, that kind of thing. That just gave me the fuel to really continue down that path. And it's just something, it is chapter 3, as you say, and I'm still on chapter 3. And for me, chapter 3 is about, because I'll probably always be in There's no fourth Reich for me. You know, I'll probably always be in this one because I'm doing what I want to do. And even if I release music that's more underground now under an alias, or I release, you know, a big commercial cover version, I'm now making the music that I want to make when I want to make it. I'm playing it when I want to play it to a crowd that I want to play it to. And for me, that's the dream. And it doesn't really matter. I want to play in front of as big a crowd I can. I want to make loads of money, of course I do. But for me, I have a career that I feel I can do as long as I want to keep doing this. I don't necessarily have to things don't feel outside of my grasp anymore. I don't have imposter syndrome. I feel validation comes from me now as opposed to needing to seek it externally. And that's, without me realizing it all along, that's been the goal. And I only know that was the goal now because I feel so gratified by it and grateful for it. You know, so money comes and goes. You'll have the ups, you'll have the downs, you know, the peaks and the troughs. That's all fine. I've learned to accept that as part of the path that I've chosen. And it doesn't matter who you talk to. You can talk to Jax Jones, you can talk to Tiësto, you can talk to Carl Cox, whoever it is. They still have their downs. They might be living in a mansion with you know, bringing in 5 million a year or whatever it is. I'm obviously making stuff up here. It doesn't matter who they are or how perceivably successful they are. They're having those downs, those troughs, those peaks. Everything is relative. It's like we were talking about grief and tough times. It's relative. It's the same with success. As long as you're happy doing what you're doing and like in broad strokes, happy, because you're not going to love everything that you do all the time. It's not all love and light, obviously. As long as in broad strokes, you're enjoying the journey, wherever that may lead. Well, for me, that's my chapter 3. That's where I am at the moment. And that's where I'm happy to stay. And I can mold what chapter 3 looks like in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, but I don't need a chapter 4, because for me, it's about creatively expressing myself and enjoying what I'm doing and being lucky enough to earn a living as I do that from it.
Very well said, John. Very well said. Just one or two last questions and then I'll let you go. One thing, I was in Halifax, which is beside Bradford and Leeds in England there back at Christmas. I was playing a game of pool. Oh yeah, we must. Snooker's not for me now, John. I'm not gonna lie. You demolished me in snooker, but if you're down for a game of pool, sometimes I fancy myself in a game of pool. My cue ball control has dramatically increased in the last while. But was playing my cousin in pool, and this is in Halifax in England. And what comes on? What comes on in the place like a pool hall? But one of your songs came on, and I was like, "Ah, man, that's lovely. That really is lovely."
I love hearing stuff like that.
Yeah, man, it's a lovely moment. I want to also say a massive shout out to Colin, who I've been very grateful. I was only speaking to him last week there. I've been very grateful to get to know over the last while. What does Colin mean in your journey? Because for anyone who doesn't know, Colin is one of John's co-producers and whatnot.
Colin, who I work with in the studio, has been a monstrous part of the journey. We first started working together well over 10 years ago. It's probably 15 years ago at this stage. I was already producing and DJing and et cetera, et cetera. And this guy from Cork got in touch through a mutual friend, and he just wanted to do some work together. And his background was hip hop, and he was a rapper as well, but primarily a producer. And we just found from working together, we're very different people, but we found from working together that we were more than the sum of our parts, and some of my strengths complemented, you know, some of my weaknesses say he had strengths in, so we complemented each other in that regard. And we still do a huge amount of work. Like, along the journey, everything we have done hasn't been done together. He's done his stuff, I've done my stuff, but we have done an enormous amount together. So like, he's been a huge part of especially chapter 3. You know, like he's co-produced the likes of PYT and Hot Stepper. Our studios are in the same building. We're right beside each other. There's a doorway separates the two studios. That's it. We're constantly bouncing off each other. Like, we work together every day of the week. And, you know, we're really good friends as well, obviously, at this stage. And, like, I can't underestimate how important a part of the journey he has been, because musically he opened me up to different methods of production, different styles of music. I mean, I would have been when it comes to hip hop, which has been a huge part of my life, I would have listened to a lot of West Coast rap growing up. So yeah, so like the West Side stuff, in particular Tupac, and you know, my exposure to the more soulful side of hip hop would have been quite minimal, and even, you know, the more laid back East Coast stuff, I would have been still am a huge Biggie fan, but never really got, say, Nas, wouldn't have been Jay Dilla or any of that, you know. Yeah. So he exposed me to all of that, and while we still laugh at each other and we'll abuse each other's taste in music, particularly hip hop, we've learned a lot from each other.
Incredible.
From that too, you know. So like it's light-hearted stuff, and I've even grown to like some of the stuff, the more soulful stuff that he would have grown up listening to. Not a massive fan still, but you know, there's an appreciation for it. And look, isn't that the joy of music?
Having the appreciation of different tastes.
Completely and utterly subjective. It doesn't matter whether you like Venga Boys or whether you like Jay Dilla or whether you're into Mozart. If it does it for you, it does it for you. There's no right or wrong.
Feeling it gives you. John, last question before I leave you and love you. Influence. When I was saying your intro there, I actually love doing the intros, man. It's actually one of my favorite things in the podcast, doing like putting together a little intro for someone. I mentioned how you've been quite influential, be it directly or indirectly, and there's just no doubting it, as opening many doors in the industry. How do you look on your influence, maybe in the likes of like where everything in dance music is at today, from like Welshie to like Bangers Only? And are you proud of your influence? As I say, sometimes it's directly and sometimes it's indirectly. Do you think about it often, or is it just part and parcel of giving?
I'll be honest, I'm not overly aware of it. Because if I look at my journey, and I'll talk about the influence of someone like Mark Kavanagh, for example, I would never see myself in that light. You know, I have always tried to be helpful to people, but ultimately, as I see it, like, would Welshie be doing what he's doing without me? I've no doubt that he would. That's in him. He's always wanted to DJ. He's always wanted. So I don't know how influential I've been on. Maybe some of the songs have been influential. Maybe I have been influential. I don't know, but I can understand how a song like PYT, that was so big, and you know, the big kind of piano house cover thing wasn't really being done that often at that time. It was relatively new, and there was a wave came after it. Whether it was because of that or that was a part of it, and other tracks as well, I don't know. It may have been the case, it may not have been. But I'm not really, and this is me being honest, I'm not really aware of whether I personally have influenced anyone else's career. I've obviously had an influence on Colin's career, as he has on mine, because we've directly worked together. And while I have directly worked with people like Welshie or whatever, I don't think these guys or girls wouldn't. I don't think it's a case that they wouldn't be doing it if I wasn't.
I want to big you up here, John.
They'd be doing it anyway. You know?
I think it's important that I big you up here, because I think similar to what was the DJ in the car? What was the DJ's name in the car again? Sorry, that in Ibiza. Fergie. Yeah. I don't know if, did you ever tell Fergie that?
No, I haven't, and I was just thinking as I was relating the tale to you, I must tell him this.
You've never told him that, John.
No.
And it can be sometimes a difficult thing to give someone their flowers. It's sometimes because I think a lot of times we have appreciation for people, and unfortunately it comes from when they pass away, and that's why you get the big love and whatnot of abundance of love, and that this person did that and this person did this. But it can be a difficult thing to tell someone how meaningful or inspired they've been to you. And just like Fergie never knew that left America on you, how influential that one moment was. Just like you don't know, John, right now, that someone 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that maybe a big producer or artist now was in the crowd and looked at you and had that moment, oh wow, I could do this. And straight away that influence is there. To 5 years from now, you're finishing a gig, or your back's, oh, the mother's ringing, mommy's ringing. Sorry, man. You don't know, we never know we never know who's watching, and we never know who we truly influence. You're in like 5 years from now, you're doing a gig and you're backstage And one of the biggest producers come over to me and was like, actually, John, I was at that gig and that meant a lot to me. And boom, all of a sudden it hits home. And it's not like, it's just having the realization, not desiring that fulfillment or yearning for like someone to tell you that, but knowing that if you do what you love and you do it really well, you will influence a lot of people. That's why I was very careful. I said direct or indirectly, because sometimes it can be indirectly. And again, where they don't even know that you influenced or inspired them. Like it was at a subconscious level. So I just want to big you up there, dude, because you're a very grounded, level-headed person, but you've accomplished so much and you have opened doors. And again, I'm not a maestro when it comes to dance music, but there's definitely, I'm sure there's doors that you've opened for people, knowingly or unknowingly, that have like made quite the impact on people. So I think you deserve.
Yeah, hopefully.
You deserve your flowers,
I'd like to think that is the case. Yeah, it's not something I give much thought to, but I appreciate that.
There you go, dude. I'm good. I love bigging people up. It's one of my favorite things to do. John, I'm going to leave it there, my man. It's been an absolute pleasure.
The pleasure's been all mine. It's gone in the blink of an eye. I've been looking forward to this. As you know, I'm a fan of your podcast anyway, and what you do in general. Like from the first time we met, like my first exposure to you, as you know, was you performing. And I remember Colin was with me. It was, can't remember the venue. It was
January 2020.
Yeah, and it was just before the COVID madness began and all that. But I remember, I have to meet this guy. Who is this guy? I've never heard anyone from Ireland like perform in that way, and it just kind of went from there, you know. Like it was. So I'm
Thank you, man.
a big fan of what you do as well, and I've been looking forward to it. And you haven't let me down.
I'm glad to hear.
This has just felt like a chat between friends as opposed to a podcast. Like I mean, I've probably said stuff. Well, like a kind of an open book anyway. I don't mind saying stuff, but like there's stuff there that you as a skilled podcaster have managed to get out to me without me even realizing I'm talking about stuff I've never spoken about before. That Fergie thing, for example, some of the stuff I've been through in the last few years, like I haven't spoken about that, but it just felt like two lads having a chat, you know,
Hey,
which is what it is.
Literally, man, because that's where I find podcasts. It's like the first few minutes you're in a podcast, but if you get that connection, boom, you're just chatting, like you're just having a conversation. Like,
but that's the beauty of what you bring to your podcast. It's so casual, it's so natural, and I think, you know, as somebody who's been on your side of the mic as well quite a lot, I think that's the most important thing for any that it's not an interview, it's a conversation. I think that's what's most relatable to the listener generally.
Appreciate that, man. It's very kind words. Very grateful, man. Guys, this has been another episode of One Step at a Time, which is the host, the Ocean Flight 111, heading straight to full potential with Zero Delays. Guys, John, don't have a good day. Have a great day. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Yeah, it goes late nights on the road. Yeah, that's just how it goes. Yeah, that's just how it goes these days. I'ma try my best to make this flight, but if I don't wake up tomorrow, then the sun will still be. Yeah, it goes late nights on the road. Yeah, that's just how it goes. Yeah, that's just how it goes these days.